I will try to pay tribute to what we have done in the Millennium project, though I only stand for one node. I chair the German node of this project since 2003, but nevertheless, I will speak about these scenarios as Jerry himself couldn't be here. I have basically two messages for this talk. The first and main one is that we, as futurists, have a responsibility to create more positive images about the possible futures around work, and that we have the tools to do so. And the second is actually combined with a question to you, which is how I would like to start. I think maybe we are already embodying a little bit this kind of new future worlds of work. And for this, I would like to make a test question I often do when I speak about the future of work and ask you some questions. So in your own work, do you do sometimes additional work? More than is strictly needed? More than is maybe in a job description, if you even have one, if you don't have one? Do you do pro bono work? And or does work sometimes provide you with, at least sometimes, a sense of meaning, sense of contributing, of doing something good, and not just making a bunch of money? So if there's a yes in the room, and yes, your bosses might be watching, I'm sorry, I can't fix this, and we're not counting statistically. Can you give me a raise of hand if you would give a yes to this? Okay, you like your work. That's a very, okay, that was strong. I couldn't really count. But okay, there was a strong confirmation of the theory that maybe we are, in parts at least, embodying what many see as the future of work, and I will line out what I mean by this. But generally, maybe to take a step back, why are we speaking about the future of work? And why is this important? We've heard about Industry 4.0. We have heard about the fundamental changes we are seeing in how industry is organized. And if we remember a bit what industrialization did, the last big revolution in technology, it did a lot of things, and this symbolizes how people started working in the morning. And they went somewhere and they stamped in the time they start, and when they went out, they stamped out again this time they ended. And the time was counted. And the critical thing is that not only the time was counted, and this is what you got paid for, the hours you put in, but that really when we take a step back and remember what this did, is it fundamentally changed how our whole society is actually organized. So the Industrial Revolution changed where people lived. They all went where the work was, which is where the factory was. It changed how families are organized, how we structure our time, what we understand as personal time and family time, how gender roles are organized. So it's really a fundamental fabric of our society, and sometimes we are not aware of how big that influence is. Today, all the growth in the last years, at least in the developing regions, has been in knowledge work. And yes, this is sometimes how we organize this and how it looks like. Not the nicest way, maybe also a bit like a factory. But it's still, the majority of work is still organized in a way that are sort of coming from the principles of the last industrial revolution, which is that people go where the work is. And this still underpins a lot of our societal structures. So to look at work is so important because it's one of the major societal systems. And it underpins a lot. It makes possible that we have a functioning economy. If nobody worked, the economy as such, capitalist system, wouldn't work. It underpins our social systems, said about where we live and so on, but just on a personal level also. It's not only a way to make a living, it's also a core part of human identity, of how people understand themselves. And the majority of the working age population does work in one way or another. So it structures also our identity, our sense of self, and it creates a lot of social connections. Most of the people, by the way, meet their spouses at work. So social connection is not only friends at work, other futurists you might want to talk to. It has quite a lot of influence. And yes, I'm not the only one saying so. Just to show you, when you Google future of work and study and look for PDFs, okay, 3 million hits. So you have a lot of reading to do, and there's a lot of attention at the moment on this topic. And I've just listed a little bit without being able to go in detail through this, what kind of trends are being named. So there's a big discussion around Western perspective in this, the increased perceived density of work. We have to do more in less time. Less people have to do more work. We have to speed up. It's changing very radically. There's the big debate, and this is what we will go a bit deeper in, about automation and the potential loss of jobs. It was mentioned in the morning opening sessions also quite a bit. I'll speak more about it later. Job growth in service sectors I have mentioned. The increasing participation of women in the workforce and in leadership, shifting gender roles and leadership understanding. The rising share of alternative work forms. The so-called non-standard work forms is how the statistics people call it. Non-standard is anything that's not 9 to 5, has a regulated time, has a clear starting time, a clear job description, and is on an unlimited contract. So the rise of this, also of potential gig work, where you work for a few cents to feed information about colors of products into Amazon Mechanical Turk, or get paid for delivering food on your own bike, or that kind of thing. And then some topics where also we had great sessions here at the conference about the more human-centric organizations. Sophie gave a great overview on this. New leadership forms I heard popping up in several discussions, and paradigm changes towards more diversity in the workplace. And this is just to name the top sort of stuff that comes up when you look at this topic, and I cannot go in more detail, but there's more to it. In contrast, when you look around and see how the media looks at this topic, what we see at the moment is that there's a clear focus on one issue, and that is the risk that your job is taken by a robot. And I picked on purpose. It's not the only thing, but it's the main message that really is at the moment being. I'm sorry to all the press people here. I know you're trying to do your best, and there's more. But if you scan and if you map for a time what is being reported, this is really the main topic that comes out. And I'm showing quality media here on purpose. It's not that you say this is just in sort of strange media, which is just oriented on the headlines and on the scandals and so on. It's The Guardian, it's The New Yorker, it's the Financial Times, it's Wired. And they all have more or less the same headline: the robots are going to take your jobs. And this, we have heard, is risky. Why? Because the fear is so risky. This focuses the attention around fear, a horrible future scenario where people are out of jobs, and we have seen it's a fundamental fabric, and for many people it's also the only income they have. Not many people have other forms of income than paid labor. So this is really causing a lot of fear at the moment in the debates. You can say for a good reason, and in case you are new to the topic, I would recommend you watch this video, which is called Humans Need to Apply, and which has this overview, which makes a very clear point that yes, there is actually indeed a risk. So the media does not come from nothing just because it wants to scandalize. We have strong technology progress at the moment, and we see automation taking place in many areas where we could not imagine it before. And the argument why a machine, a bot, an algorithm, whatever, could take over a job is 3 main points. It's cheaper, it's faster, it doesn't have to sleep, it doesn't have to take a holiday, it never has a cold or a bad mood. It's more accurate for the same reasons. It's a machine. So, but that often leads us to the conclusion this only happens in jobs where you have routine tasks. That's often what we see at the moment, where you can prove automation is already happening. However, I would argue maybe that's not so much the case. And this is an unsolved question, you can say, in research. Is the automation really happening, and how far will which jobs be affected? You have lots of studies around it and lots of argumentation around, will there be more jobs, new jobs created than those we automate? However, the point I would like to make, because they point us a bit in the direction of the scenarios from the Millennium Project, is that work that we have previously never thought could be automated is now being automated. Your sports news, your financial news, these are all already being written by robots. The Financial Times had a competition between a journalist who wrote an article about a complex topic on policy matters with a human writer. And the editor who had to judge which article was better was not able to spot which article was written by a human and which was written by an algorithm. So when we keep saying it's only routine task, we think what you mean by routine task and be aware of, yes, it's really already happening around it. I don't want to go into the scandalization myself, but just to say, let's not discard it also too easily. That would be too short-sighted. Also, I'm not trying to blame the media. I think we have a lot of also clear studies, very respected studies from solid organizations who are not so prone to really scandalizing and just trying to make people afraid, who show things like this. This is the World Economic Forum, and they are trying to project the net employment outlook by job families or areas of work. And not going into detail, but just saying, okay, the black stuff, it's vanishing. The blue stuff is the new work they see. And yes, if you sum up the black bubbles, these are much bigger than summing up the blue bubbles. And they are not the only ones. As I said, there's a big debate around it. The problem is that the past data we have on automation, we cannot really compare with the situation we have now because the jobs have changed, the regional differences are very high. We are looking at the moment at tasks being automated, not complete jobs. Then other tasks emerge. People can take this. It's very hard to guess what will be the bottom line. But also these very solid sources say things like there could be what we call a game changer, a disruption in this. I don't know what to do. Okay, I continue, or what should I do? Yeah. Okay, it's fine. It's technologies, game changers. So also the very solid sources say something like this. There is a risk around it. So this is the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. You might have seen this over the years. They keep publishing it, ask a lot of people, rank risks. And now in the top 5 trends that determine global developments. This again, quite traditional conservative medium and publication lists rising income and wealth disparity, which is related to automation clearly because the automation has driven down wage levels for those with a lower education. On the top 1 point. So there is a thing around here. Also, when you look at the studies, what they say, what this could mean, what could this change mean? You get lots of messages like this, where it said that it's clear from the data that ultimately we have to do something today. We all know this, urgent targeted action today, build a workforce with future-proof skills, and if not, we will have to cope with ever-growing unemployment and inequality, and businesses with a shrinking consumer base. And these kinds of messages are buried in nearly every global study, or also the national studies that I know and can read. And sometimes they vanish. I mean, they are basically saying we have a global crisis on the way if we don't fix this problem. So you read through it, it all sounds very sensible. And yes, okay, targeted action, yes, unemployment, oh, yes, you go on. But the message in there is there might be real trouble. The problem that we have at the moment with these kinds of studies is that they stop at this point. So they stop at saying we might have this kind of trouble, and that's where the Millennium Project scenarios try to start. So while lots of studies say, yes, there's fundamental change, there might be big rise in global unemployment, the project saw that we have this kind of topic having increasing attention, but nobody looked at the long term. Nobody looked at what if that really played out over time and what could that mean. And that's why we started developing these scenarios. I think most of you know the project, but that's for those who might not, just to say quickly, it's an international NGO, a non-profit organization. So all of us work pro bono on this, who contribute from the nodes. We are organized via nodes. 65, I have learned from my colleague today. We are today not 50 as it's on the slide. We are 65 nodes who organize futurist people who look at the long term in the different regions and nations and bring together their views to contribute to a global discussion around issues that have a global relevance. And we do publish biannually the State of the Future report and pick topics where we think it's critical somebody looks at this from an unbiased perspective. We are not funded by a corporation. We are not funded by one specific institute. We do not have just 2 years of a research project. No, we continue to work together. And that's how we can look at this stuff. So we picked work to look at the long-term perspective of this, to look at what these kinds of sentences saying, there might be, if we don't do the targeted action, there might be real trouble on the way. We look at what could this mean in the long term. And we found out it's really hard to look at it in the long term. The scenarios we have now, they are being developed, they have been developed and are now in discussion worldwide. They stem from one finding in the first Delphi round. So we had a Delphi, a global expert survey, with around 400 contributors worldwide, also specifically from the technology side to get this content in. And they looked at also, we asked at the beginning, so what is with this automation debate now? And we saw a big debate reflecting the discussion in the research also around what is the level of automation we can expect or not expect, and will there be more new jobs created or not? And the unclarity in the research is reflected in the Delphi. People debated a lot, and it's a real-time Delphi, so they can also come to consensus, conclusions together. And what came out was that the average expectancy, not the highest are much higher, but the average expectancy of the experts in the Delphi after some consensus building was a massive rise. And I think it might be misleading. It's just like, so yeah, it rises a bit, but today we are at 6% global unemployment. So if this is the average and includes all the very skeptic guys who say, it's not so big a problem, this would still be a massive change. So we basically realized many of the experts say, yes, this could happen. It's maybe possible. We don't know for sure if the automation theory is right, but it could happen. So we said, okay, then we go further and ask what would happen then and what would be solutions. And that, I think, was a big surprise to us in the study, because we saw that when we asked for solutions, there was first a long silence and people going, yeah, it's a very difficult education. And then somebody said basic income. Many people said, oh, come on, it's not possible. Cannot do this, we cannot finance this. But in the end, if you take education out of the equation, which I think is consensus, and everybody says it is just right, and we now have to do this very fast, then the only concrete answer people found and were able to agree on in this survey that is on the table at the moment was basic income. And we are asking very traditional, established experts here also mostly in the results. And only 21% said, this is irrelevant, it's not necessary, it's a crazy idea, you cannot do it. And 79% says it's either absolutely necessary or very important, or this kind of group may be helpful, I don't know anything better, okay, we put it here. So this for us was a big surprise, but we were able to work the scenarios around this and said, okay, then let's play it out. Yeah, we are not sure also, we know exactly that this is the way to go, but we try to describe this. And that's what the scenarios do. So they take the assumptions that, in fact, and that's the starting assumption, which you can debate, I understand, but they take the starting assumptions that, yes, there's a possibility that due to automation and the synergy of technologies and the possibility of general artificial intelligence, not just artificial intelligence as we know it now, but artificial intelligence that can learn and learn how to do new tasks. That therefore we could have high unemployment in the traditional sense, and this leads to a change really in the work system. And there are 3 scenarios we have now developed. I will focus on 2 of them. The third we explain later in another lack of time. 2 scenarios. And there's a transition phase that, interestingly enough, does look the same with the assumptions we have for both the more negative and the positive scenario. And I think from what I said about also the studies and the media perception of the topic at the moment, it's clear that, that's easy to map out a horror scenario, a dramatic negative scenario around this development. So we would have more and more automation, loss of jobs, people don't know how to make money. It hits the people first who have a lower education and a lower income and less resources to draw upon. We have opening social gaps, we have upheavals and conflicts around it. And then in this scenario, it turns really bad. We don't manage to fix it. We have more civil wars. We have increased global migration. People just go where the work is. There's wars for work, much more poverty, and in the end, an extremely split society and world. So the scenario is called turmoil and despair. And yes, it's a negative image, but we had to put it in because if we only put the positive, nobody's listening. The really interesting one, I think, for the sake also of this and our conversation here, is the positive, which really describes a changed world of organizing work, looking at work, how it functions, and how it interacts with social security also. And the basic income is just one element here. So we also have this problem here, assumed at the beginning, that the old system's not working so well anymore. The automation is kicking in and it is eating jobs, and it's hard for people to find new ones. But then we see a change in how we react to this. Basic income pilot, as I said, are one aspect of this, but there's also a global education push and global cooperation of how to fix this problem. There is tax on robotic work. When paid income doesn't provide the tax income so much anymore, we tax robotic work. We also have combined income from humans working with robots and then taking over. For example, we have truck drivers in these scenarios who train the algorithms who will drive their trucks in the future and work with them, and who can then thereby own a share of the algorithm that then makes the money. But then they profit from this kind of AI they have also trained. So there's new mechanisms of getting in income in this scenario. There's a new sharing and swapping economies, a freelancer wave. So people also start to say, okay, maybe it's not the paid labor so much. Maybe I do something just because I'm interested. I want to do this. It's adding to my normal 9 to 5 or maybe 9 to 3 job. So less people also work full 40 hours weeks. They add on something. They try to look for meaning. And in the end, what we see here is not that we have large unemployment and people sit at home and they just play around in the virtual realities, but that they really keep working. So the assumption in this scenario is not that people work less. It's just less traditional paid labor. There's actually double the people working, but much more are self-employed, and much more get not traditional income, but maybe points for the contribution they make to the community. So many decide to also work for the community or do something creative where they do not get so much pay, but they are interested and they still like it and they still do it. So it's another idea around work, and work is not anymore, you have to do it to make a living. But you do it for meaning, for self-actualization, and that's why the scenario is really called the Self-Actualization Economy. So it tries to map out how this could work, and I cannot explain in detail. I'd ask you to read the scenarios really to get a feel of how this works and engage in the conversations around this, because it was a hard way to get there, to really describe a positive image and get the feedback also from the experts who were struggling to say, how could it work? But it is imaginable, and it went through sort of being checked off by the experts in the process to say, yes, it is one possible, more positive world we can imagine. So there's many issues described. How's my time? Sirkka, can you give me a note? I'm worrying if I should speed up a little. It was a long day. Speed up? Speed up, okay. If you want more details, that was very interesting. I know. It's fine, I think, actually. So there's many issues around this. and we can discuss. I'm happy to show this images to anybody who still needs to see it. There is a good message also around this. So it's not only this bleak image, and then you have this positive where you're not so sure whether you believe in it. In the scenarios, for example, in both versions and also the medium, we have many jobs. This is also an interesting message, I think, all who are working in this space. Are we preparing the people for the right professions that are coming up? Or do we keep preparing them for having a lifelong profession that maybe is being automated or fundamentally changed in the next years? So we have personal health assistants, lots of growth is expected around personal matters and care. We also have lots of designers for virtual rooms or housekeepers for the metaverse, the virtual world we live and work in. We have lots of translators, human-machine and machine-human, and lots of stuff around this. So new jobs also emerging. And before we go into how you can engage in this conversation, I would like to make 2 points, stressing that even if you think it's sort of nutty to look at this long-term future, and yes, the technology have always changed the way we work, and it's always happened, and then new jobs came up and so on, I think we see 2 points where it's clear that fundamental change is affecting work and the way we communicate and organize work already today. And one is demonstrated much more clearly than any explanation from me can do it in a video. So let me quickly show you a video on this. Yes, I think it's a UX designer who has made this video. And you can ask, why the hell does the kid have to have at this age the iPad and the Harper's Bazaar and the Vogue? But okay, she has it. Many have it quite early on. And if it's 2 years later, it doesn't make that much of a difference, I think. And the UX designer who made this video, he says Steve Jobs has reprogrammed the system of his kid. So the working system, and that's a younger generation that's coming up. We already see a big debate in the workplace about the clash between generations, which I think it's in part also very distorted. But we already see a big generational gap between how we deal with technology and communication. And that's a major leadership question at the moment already in the workplace. But this generation, they expect really, really fast replies, just to quote one aspect of this, as we have seen. And the second aspect I would like to stress that is visible today, and you don't need to believe in any trend analysis and automation assumption to see today, is that knowledge work already is free from the limitation to time and space. We still do it, strangely enough, most people still do go to these cubicles, which I don't understand, and I see revolution coming up and people realize they don't have to do this anymore. But at least theoretically, you don't have to go somewhere anymore to do this knowledge work. Of course, we do also need to connect to people and have meetings and discuss and so on, but the old principle, which made it that our mobility flows, where people live, how the cities are structured, the time when we work, can dictate that we have to be at the same time at the same place to do it. It's gone. It's not there anymore. We need to coordinate when we meet and when we are together, but that's it. The rest of the work you can do when you want and where you want. And there, I think, is a big revolution potential we haven't yet tapped into. You can say there's also, of course, stress potential, and we all know about the debate on do you have to turn the emails off and so on at a certain point. But there's also an empowerment potential for people to be much freer than they were around work and do it as they choose and as it works for them and their personal life and their other needs than they were before. So there's many issues to discuss, even if you don't buy into the automation theory. And we are doing this at the moment, and I hope many of you can join these discussions. This is the list of the workshops that are going on at the moment in the Millennium project. Some have already done initial workshops, some are planning at the moment, and I know Finland is also trying to get this off the ground and hoping that, we hope so too, that there will be government funding, national funding, or other kind of funding for this, right? So we hope to see a Finnish workshop also soon. Yeah? And there are some who are in negotiation trying to get this off the ground. And we are basically trying in all the countries which are in the Millennium Project to enable a conversation around this. And you are invited to do so because it's a complex topic. And people need to start developing these positive images around work. And not only these negative horror images of the robot taking your job, and then you have no money anymore, and then nobody takes care of you, and only the elite keeps on living somehow, and keeps on taking care of themselves. This is feeding, I think, very much into a very negative development at the moment where people feel left out and threatened. So from these workshops, we also collect implications, just to name a few. It's around changing curricula, about how we learn already in nursery schools. Greece has said, Nondas is also here, we need free tele-education for everybody. It's about promoting more work from home. It's about mastering a shift from mastering a profession, one job you do your whole life, to mastering specific skills that you can then employ in different jobs. So it's a variety of implications that we are now collecting from these scenarios. And I think there's more to come, and these will then be brought together in a complete analysis in the final study. So I'm not trying to repeat all this again. There's many implications around this. The key point I tried to make was that we have a distorted view of the future of work at the moment in the media that focuses on the scare around the robots taking over the job. And this feeds into a conversation that at the moment increases, I think, societal gaps that we have and problems in conversations between different groups. And it's really dangerous, and I think we as futurists have to foster a broader debate around alternative options. Even if you don't believe in the positive example I have just shown, I'm fine. But there have to be positive visions around the future of work, and it is our job to keep creating them and enabling this discussion around it. Think personally also that there's a role specifically for us bringing in the younger generation and the younger generation contributing. It's often us delegating to somebody 20 years younger how they should work, and this will all change and so on, but they need a voice in this dialogue. So I think that's also something we should do. The scenarios are a tool for doing so, and you are all invited to contribute in the next steps in the project. So approach us, the people who are here, and please contribute. And yes, many more to say, but with this, thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here at the conference giving comments to Cornelia's presentation, excellent presentation on the future of work and Millennium Project scenarios. So I think that nobody disagrees after Cornelia's presentation that future of work is really a hot topic. because work is so close to our heart, our life, but it's really a serious issue that has to be tackled. So actually, as you showed, Cornelia, was it 3 million hits or something like that on the future of work on the website? There are several scenarios on the future of work. And actually, we used in an initial workshop Millennium Project scenarios, but we compared it, or the set of scenarios from the Millennium Project, to another set of scenarios that we have made within the Near Carbon Energy Project. And it was quite interesting. Actually, we could find a lot of similarities, even though the Millennium Project has 3 scenarios, we have 4, but there are so many similarities that we actually highlighted that these similarities raise these key issues very well. So we would like to continue comparing these. But what is important in Cornelia's talk was that Cornelia emphasized that we need positiveness. Hybridity is happening in many sectors of life. It's nothing new. Hybrid means a combination of 2 or more things, but it's not just a simple combination of 2 things or issues. There's something more in this kind of hybrid entities. Of course, in biology, it means an animal that has been produced from 2 different types of animal. In ancient mythology, a lot of hybrid figures were used, and hybrids had some kind of superpower. We remember these kind of snakes with several heads, or centaurs with positive power. So perhaps we could apply this metaphor to modern day and the future of work. So what hybridity in work would mean? It would mean several combinations of physical, virtual, digital work, techniques, spaces, practices, contents. But it could also mean that we could focus our attention to a hybridity of organizations, companies, and the networks that these companies are active. And also combination of public and private, technology and culture and art. And of course different activities in life, working not as a separate activity but in the melange of housing, leisure. And we even had one of the participants in our Futures Clinic coined the term bleisure, hybridity of business and leisure, and income and meaning. So Cornelia pointed out that actually work is no more just like income and status thing. It is more and more about our identity and social connections and meanings. So we also paid attention to this kind of paradigm shift, not only in the field of work, but in the field of energy, because we see similarities there as well. From societal perspective, actually the most radical consequence of this renewable energy transition that we are in may be rapidly falling marginal costs of energy, and on the other hand, in production and work, when we have more and more automation, the marginal costs of physical products are at the same time also decreasing. So we may be entering an automated or robotized post-work society where collaborative and co-creative models of organization replace traditional organizations. And of course here prosumerism is important both in this changing paradigm of work and energy. So work or paid labor or salary work as we know it today is ending. Something else is needed instead. And we propose that peer-to-peer production models could be one answer to provide this kind of positive narrative. Both, on one hand, from the point of view of energy transition and also from the point of view of changing paradigm of work and production. So actually we propose this kind of peer-to-peer work in the digital meaning society by 2050 to be a preferred future vision for the future of work. And what does it mean? Here this digital meaning society means that we have digitalization, which is related to automation and robotization, but not digitalization as such. It's just an enabling platform for digital products and digital services. The main idea and focus is on work as redefined as meaningful activity. And we had this kind of initial workshop using Millennium project scenarios last year. We have a report on it. It's called Fuzzy Futures of Work. It's online, where we studied futures of work in a world of automation and distributed low-cost renewable energy. We had 5 groups tackling these questions. What would the future of work look like in the scenarios? And actually, as a result of this futures workshop, we clustered key themes, topics, and categorized them into 7 categories. So it was this kind of initial workshop, warm-up workshop for a national workshop, discussing MP scenarios maybe later. So what we came up with was this kind of vision, peer-to-peer work in the digital meaning society, and with 7 key elements. And actually, just before this plenary session, Cornelia moderated a very interactive workshop where we had 5 tables and presenting these kind of considerations, reflections for the future of work. And I thank all the participants in that workshop because we are going to feed the results back to Millennium project scenarios. And then if we look at, for example, these hybrid companies as key element, it means that work is seen as a place for creativity and self-actualization. And it is actually directly the same kind of contents that Millennium project scenario number 1, self-actualization, self-actualized economy has. And there is no sharp division between work and leisure, and more focus is paid to immaterial needs and values, and companies actually are truly functioning as free enterprises. This means that they are mainly seen as concentrations of intellectual and social capital. It's their asset rather than being just profit maximizing units. And of course, this is an ideal preferred future. It's not automatic, but this is a key element in this kind of vision of self-defined jobs, self-management, and constant learning. So the function of human work actually is to offer a place for workers' self-expression. And here work is meaningful, creative, and purposeful. Products are authentic expressions of workers' individuality in this future of work scenario. Together with technological developments, robotization, automation, and artificial intelligence, increases in search for meanings and social capital in work, and on the other hand also decreases in energy and automation production costs, these elements could direct our world into unknown, complex, and hybrid futures. And my concluding comment, and then a question to Cornelia, in order to achieve decent futures of work, hybridity, as well as this vision for peer-to-peer work in digital meaning society, could be used as a lens for optimal combinations in the nature, organizing, practices and meanings for work. And also Cornelia called for us futurists to foster debate about alternative options and positive narratives. So how about if we redefine work as meaningful activity and systematically try to find solutions through that in order to achieve this goal? So the question is, what do you think about this proposal? And of course, can you convince the Finnish government to run this real national workshop?
Okay, where are they? Where are they? Yes, I think you should have good luck, I hope, after the conference. I mean, it was visible also how strong the connections are with the Millennium Project, with this topic. It came up in many debates, so whoever you are, I would, if you need convincing, can you please get in touch. I wish you good luck, I hope. It's time, I think. You have done already some work on this, so it would be time to do this now.
Yeah, and the timing actually would be perfect because, as we heard from the yesterday's presentations, that the Finnish government Foresight report is now being done on the future of work, and
Fantastic.
part number 1 is completed, but there is still part number 2 coming.
See, okay, then you do the workshop and then there you go. Yeah, fantastic. No, good. No, I think the question with the hybridity and the digital meaning society, there's many things I think many of us can say around it. But just one comment I would like to make. One thing we saw when we had in Germany this big refugee crisis, or you could also say refugee welcome phase, depending on how you look at it, was that there was a big challenge to how do we get any kind of education, language courses and so on to the refugees, and we weren't able to scale up the old systems quickly enough. And so what happened was that the younger generation actually fixed the problem more or less, at least parts of it, by creating tools, digital tools. So they created learning apps that you can run on any kind of phone, on any kind of tool you might have, and they are quite widespread in the refugee population. So they just created alternative solutions, while the old system was not at all, I know in Cologne quite well, that was not at all possible to quickly scale up, even in a space of a year or so, to get them just to plain language courses, which more or less everybody wanted to do. But the younger generation said, I have a digital solution for this, and for me it's important. And they just formed startups, they formed new forms of cooperation. So I think there you can find examples where it's embodied, this kind of digital meaning society.
Yes, that's a good example and evidence. Thank you.